Good morning. This is the Lou Rockwell Show, and it's so great to have as our guest this morning Mr. Gerald Celente. Gerald is always one of our most popular guests, and if you, in the unlikely event you've not heard him before, you'll understand why after we're through. But he's the founder and director of the TrendsResearchInstitute, publisher of the TrendsJournal. And Gerald, before we talk about the economy and world revolution and the police state and prospects for liberty and various other things, you had a very, very interesting encounter with John Connally before he died. This is the former governor of Texas, a longtime crony and aide to Lyndon Johnson, somebody who was shot during the Kennedy assassination. He told you some amazing things.
Yes, what happened, Lou, was that, first of all, thank you for having me back. I enjoy being on your show and admire all that you do and your staff in bringing freedom and liberty to America. So thank you for having me. It was 1992, October 25th, just before the presidential election. And I had written Trend Tracking back in 1989. And in that book, I had predicted that there'd be a new third party. And for some reason, I mentioned Ross Perot as the likely candidate. So Connally wanted to meet me. And I flew out to Dallas, and there were a couple of other people that were at that luncheon. And it was Pat Cadell, the former pollster, still pollster, but he had his fame from Jimmy Carter days, and John J. Hooker from Tennessee, who had just lost the governor race, but he was a gadfly against the corruption and all the campaign financing that was skewing the system. And Rama Fox, who was Larry King's girlfriend at the time, and she was there because it was John J. Hooker that put Perot on with Larry King when he announced his candidacy. So what happened was, after lunch at the Anatole, and I have to tell you, my first encounter with Connally, my first emotion was embarrassment. I was embarrassed for having prejudged someone I didn't know, because at lunch, every sentence he was saying was like a paragraph, and every paragraph like a page. And everything was crystal clear, and I really admired him and started cutting off the other people when they were speaking. We pile in the limousine. Hooker had ordered a limousine, and myself, those folks, and Nellie, she was upstairs, Connally's wife, piled into the limousine. We went back to the book depository. And Lou, it was his first time back since the assassination. And here I am sitting across from him. And he told the story of what happened. He said, I heard a gunshot. He said, I know it was a gunshot because I was hunting since I'm a little boy. And I looked over to my right. Now, that's not what he said, by the way, in that tape after the assassination. He said he looked to his left. Over to the right, by the way, was the grassy knoll. We were parked out in front. The window that you see is the side where ostensibly Lee Harvey Oswald was. And he said he was wearing a dark blue suit, scrunched up in the jump seat. He said, I looked over to my left, and there were brains on my shoulder. He said, I know they were brains because my daddy was a butcher. And he went on to tell the story of how Nellie threw himself on top of him, and they rushed over to Parkland Hospital. And ironically, a doctor that was on break saw the motorcade come screaming in, and he ran to the emergency room, and he just happened to be a thoracic surgeon. And that's the one that Connally got. But anyway, we're going back into we're driving back to the Anatole Hotel, and I'm looking across at him, and I realized he's a dying man. He died in June. I met him in October. I was in contact with him until April. And his hands had these big purple splotches on them from being on heavy doses of prednisone because of the lung wound. It was worsening. And my dad, may his soul rest in peace, died of asbestos poisoning from working in the shipyards in World War II. And he had those big purple splotches on his hands. And my dad was a tall, lanky guy, kind of like, Connolly's stature, but at the end he was very hunched over. And that's what Connally looked like. So I knew he was a dying man, and he was talking like one. We're walking back into the Anatole Hotel, and he stops me, and he said, I read your book, Trend Tracking. He said, fine piece of work. He said, I know your heart's in the right place. He said, but you don't have a clue what's going on in the government. And neither do the American people. Because if they did, there'd be a revolution in this country. And remember, this is 1992. And Connally, of course, as you mentioned, the insider, the LBJ, Democratic Party, but also becomes the Treasury Secretary under Nixon. And this is the guy when the United States finally went off the gold standard. This is somebody at the top who knew what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about the corruption and the military-industrial complex and the entire takeover. And here it is now, 20 years later, and could it be more apparent than what he said? Back then, if you talked about income inequality, you'd be called a communist. And now you pick up the Financial Times, both the Republicans and the Democrats are jumping on the platform to start speaking about it. It was the beginning of the Internet revolution. Cold War was over. There was optimism back then. So when I think back of what Connolly said back then, it's ringing very true now. The American people do know what's going on, and we may see a revolution in this country.
Well, Gerald, it is quite extraordinary. You've been fighting this sort of thing all your life. I have too. Many of the rest of us have. But the speed with which the government tyranny and the ripoff by the oligarchy and so forth has increased since 9/11 is quite extraordinary. So here we're faced with this police state, can't call it anything else, and it's getting worse by the day when we have tanks and armored personnel carriers being given out by the military to little tiny town police departments. Why is that? Obviously, they're planning a war against the American people. We have troubles in the economy. We all know that except for the 1%, we're all getting poorer. We worry about our children, our grandchildren, what their future holds. They're still fighting all these wars, although maybe, I'd like to think that maybe Obama won't bomb Syria and Iran. But give us your view of what's happening. And, Gerald, is there hope?
Well, hope. How about hope and change you could believe in? Vote for me. They say that hope is the most negative word in the metaphysical dictionary. It means wanting something to happen without doing anything. The only way I see it happening is when the people find the dignity within themselves to speak up, stand up, and fight against the tyranny that's going on. And again, you outlined it, perfectly. You're talking about the military vehicles going to small police departments in urban areas, rural areas. And I just read, recently, not far from where you are over here, Albany County. I'm in Ulster County, just below it, New York State. There's the sheriff bragging about, this huge vehicle that they got and how they need it in any time, and I went out the other night. I'm in Colonial Kingston, which is about 15 minutes away from Woodstock, and they had the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. And I love jazz. And I went to go see it at the Bearsville Theater. And on the way out there, pig patrols everywhere. These tough cops have nothing else to do but wait on the side of the road and hide to see if you're going 8 miles over the limit, if the light on around your license plate is out, or you didn't put your turn signal on, or aren't wearing your seatbelt, or could bust your chops any way they can. And after this wonderful performance by these real pros, not the junk music that they're playing today, real old timers, great guys, I wanted to go out and have a little fun. Woodstock was closed down. 11:30 at night, the lights are off in town. The roads are empty. They're empty. I've been around a long time. I remember Friday, Saturday night, the roads were packed with people going out. They've sapped the joy out of life, these SOBs. There's no fun anymore. It's the police state. They're watching every damn thing we do. They've taken the joy out of life. It's hard enough earning a living, family problems, love problems, health problems. Then you got these strangers out there that call themselves authorities and officials screwing with every aspect of your life. When are people going to stand up and stop it? And I came back from Berlin. I don't know if you know the story. It was April in 2012. And I realized being in Berlin, it was probably grander than Paris before it was bombed out. All you see, Lou, are a few old buildings and all new ones in between. An old building, a new one in between. A country that took thousands of years to develop. It had to be the height of Western civilization, the Germans, in the 1930s. Philosophically, spiritually, Culturally, how could they let a two-bit freak that Charlie Chaplin played better than he did destroy their nation? This is what's going on in my head. I'm of Italian descent. Same thing, a cartoon character like Mussolini destroying their country. Wake up, Americans. You got it right here. And just like those people didn't fight back and their nation was destroyed because cartoon characters, emperors with no clothes, and congresses of clowns and senators of morons destroyed it, the same thing is happening here. You can name the names. Obama, Bush, Clinton, Pelosi, McConnell, Reid, Boner, one Pelosi moron loser after another in front of your face with sequestering, with fiscal cliffs, with closing down the government, Obamacare, losing wars. Guess what? We're going to lose the little freedoms that we have and the greatness of this country, and they're going to take us to war at some point when this economy collapses, and if the people don't stop it, it's lost.
But aren't more and more people interested in stopping it? Aren't more and more people, young people especially, aware of what their future holds, aware of the terrible student debts they have, and maybe they're not going to have a job, and that things are just getting worse, and maybe they've had it. Maybe they've had it up to here.
They have, and it goes back to the Connolly story. It's time for a revolution. And that's why I bought these 3 buildings on the most historic corner in the United States in Kingston, the only place where there's a pre-Revolutionary War building on each corner. And I have 3 of them. The other one's a county museum. And I want to see a revolution. A spiritual, I don't mean spiritual in the airy-fairy way. I mean in finding the truth within yourself. A moral and an intellectual revolution. It's our nation. And that's what I realized when I came back from Berlin. I was looking to leave the country in 2010 and 2011. I was down in Uruguay and Argentina and Chile. I had enough of this police state. And I realized from coming back from Berlin, you can't run away. There are two-bit freaks everywhere. This is my nation. I used to hear these people say, well, if you don't like it, leave. No, you leave. I want it like the founding fathers wanted it. Not like you want it. Not like it's been destroyed of all our constitutional rights. The Bill of Rights shredded. I'm staying. And I agree that now is the time for the revolution. And as you pointed out, Lou, it's these kids with these hundreds of thousands, 80,000, 50,000. Name the number of debt that they're holding. They're going to be indentured servants. I read, Lou, where it's going to take them at least 20 years to pay off the debt of college that they with these degrees in worthlessness. So yes, the time is right, and it can happen if we the people make it happen. And we can't rely on the Bloods and the Crips, or as like people like to call them, the Republicans and the Democrats, to make it happen.
No, and of course, when we talk about a revolution, we're not talking about a violent revolution. After all, the government's got all the guns and the tanks and the drones and the bombs and all the rest. But a real revolution happens with the brain. I mean, it happens with the spirit, as you say. And I see stirrings. I see stirrings not only in this country but in other countries. I think the oligarchy, the regime, whatever we call this carbuncle, headquartered in Washington D.C. and on Wall Street, I think they're worried. I think they have concerns because it doesn't matter how many guns they've got. It doesn't matter how many cops. If the people refuse to go along, they can't actually enforce their regime. Things have to change. And anyway, dealing with college kids as I do, I see a huge amount of hope. I mean, these kids are far more aware than the typical kid was when I was that age. They're better read. They're more motivated. They're worried. And they're also very upset at what's been done to them. And boy, they should be upset.
As you point out, it's global. Matter of fact, the new TrendsJournal is coming out within a week. And we have a globalnomic page, and we're showing what youth unemployment is around the world. And you know, my saying as a former Bronx kid, you know, when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And these kids have nothing left to lose, and they're going to start losing it. And I believe, as you do, you know, a revolution of nonviolence, that'll get us nowhere. It'll only make things a lot worse. And also, and you know me, I'm a political atheist. I don't say anything good about any of the politicians usually. But I have to tell you, one of the most positive thing that, as I say it, that Obama has done in this miserable 5-6 years of being in office is this movement toward peace with Iran, and that could be very beneficial for the nation and also for the Middle East. And as I look at it, Lou, it's always about money with these people. The bottom line mentality. And the bottom line is this. The government knows there's no recovery. They know that they have to keep pumping money into the system. And they're also smart enough to know that they want to build retail sales because 70% of the United States economy is built upon consumer spending, because people like Clinton and the rest sold out our jobs in NAFTA, and they're selling out more now with the Asian agreement. But anyway, a deal with Iran, you look at oil prices over the last several months, they've been going down. In Saudi Arabia, of course, they're against Iran for other reasons. It's the Sunni Shia fight that's always going on. But the other thing is that you start having Iranian oil flooding into the markets. This is really going to drive down the price, particularly at a time when demand is going down. So this could be a very short-term boost for the economy in keeping it puttering along at the same level. So, I'm all in favor of this, just to be clear about it. I don't want war with anybody. And, as I mentioned, I'm a jazz fan. And I remember these songs. I collect old songs. And during World War II, we're going to slap those dirty little Japs. There was one jazz song after another about Germany and Japan. And now, of course, they're our allies. And the same with Vietnam. Now they're our allies. I mean, what has Iran done to us? Oh, I know there was the hostage crisis, but of course no one likes to talk about the CIA and the MI5 or 6, whatever it is over there in the UK, overthrowing the democratically elected government.
That's right.
Of Mossadegh in 1953. So this is a positive movement.
Well, it's a tremendous movement, and I hesitate to give Obama credit for anything, but especially after all he did to help stimulate the civil war in Syria, but he stopped short of bombing them. So maybe, I hate to put hopes, like you, I hesitate to put hopes in any politician, with the exception of Ron Paul when he was in office. But it is hopeful, and it's especially hopeful when you see the neocons. The neocons are always hysterical. It seems to me they get hysterical over their cornflakes in the morning, But they've gone hyper hysterical. Charles Krauthammer and these people. It's Hitler. It's Munich. It's 1938. It's, and of course, Iran's never done anything to anybody. They haven't launched a war on anybody. They haven't been at war with any other country in more than 200 years. And we have been stepping on them, of course, as you say, overthrowing Mossadegh and installing the dictator monster Shah. Then when he was overthrown, the young people in Iran saw the U.S. embassy as the directorate of the whole Shah operation, and they were right. And doesn't mean they should have gone into the embassy, but there was sure a lot of interesting info that came out from the files in that embassy. And of course, it reminds us also that U.S. embassies, wherever they are spy headquarters and military headquarters and military industrial complex headquarters. These are not what we might be taught in school is diplomacy, but diplomacy is actually possible. Maybe it's actually happening against opponents within the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the media, the State Department, the Pentagon, and so forth. So maybe we can only hope and pray that people in Iran are not going to be massacred by the hundreds of thousands as the Israelis and the Saudis and the neocons in this country would like to see happen.
Well, the other thing, too, is I'm outraged that the Prime Minister of Israel could take to the American airwaves any times that he pleases, and all of these other Israeli lobbyists having so much influence. So I want to make this really clear. I don't care if it's Italy, Israel, Ireland, name the country. Any politician that puts a foreign nation ahead of our nation is a traitor to this country. They're traitors. The American people come first. How come everybody forgot about what this nation was founded upon? The principles of the founding fathers not to become involved in foreign entanglements. And that's all this nation is now, is one foreign entanglement. Hey, no money to bail out Detroit. hey, but we'll give that Egyptian military $1.5 billion. They have it coming to them. Oh, and by the way, that's not a coup over there. You know that, right? It's officially not a coup, even though the military took over, so the military-industrial complex could keep doing business with them. So these people like Schumer and Mendez and all of the rest of them that are condemning this Iranian deal and promoting Israeli interests above our interests are traitors to the United States of America.
And of course, the whole Egyptian thing, they're always blabbing about democracy. So here we had the first democratically elected government in the many thousands of years of Egyptian history, and they immediately overthrow it and that was the CIA that was, of course, directing the Egyptian military to overthrow, and they're killing everybody who has a different view. And now all of a sudden, of course, Egypt is entirely out of the news while the killing goes on. So this is the way the U.S. operates. But maybe, just maybe, with changes of heart among us older people, as well as truth-seeing and truth-telling of younger people, we can actually do something about it.
Yes, it is. It's our nation. It's our country. Why are we relinquishing it to a gang of 535? That's how many senators and congressmen there are.
That's right.
Yeah. Right? I mean, how?
Yeah.
And they're not representing us. They're representing the people that pay their way. They call it campaign contributions. Adults call it bribes and payoffs. So, yeah, the future is in our hands. Oh, Lou, on the other issue of the economy, just quickly.
Yes, please.
I believe they're going to start tapering. I'm in that camp. And I think they're going to begin it in January. They're not going to jeopardize the holiday sales. This is what I've been saying since the beginning. And they have to start tapering. They can't just keep pumping money in. They'll come up with another scheme to stimulate, but not through this way. And I believe that interest rates are going to go up. And when they do, the economy is going to crash. This is an interest rate recovery. Hey, you want to buy a car, Lou? You don't have a job? You don't have any income coming in? Don't worry about it. You could buy an automobile, 0%. Here, call this number. We'll help you get the car and find a dealership near you. This is another no income verification loan scam. The only reason the housing market is going ahead is because of these record low interest rates. When interest rates go up, the economy collapses, and worse than that, the bond bubble explodes. So I believe that my window, as I'm looking at it now, and there are always wild cards that could change it, just like this Iranian deal is a wild card. I believe that we're going to see real economic instability around March.
Well, Gerald Celente, thanks so much for coming on the show. Thanks for your wisdom, and thanks for all you do for our country and for the cause of liberty. It's, as always, great to talk to you.
And thank you for all you do, and thank you for having me on, Lou.
Bye-bye, Gerald.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks so much for listening to the Lou Rockwell Show today. Take a look at all the podcasts. There have been hundreds of them. There's a link on the LRC front page. Thank you.